was once going through the autobiography of a very great man, and in the first few lines of his autobiography was mentioned his net worth, which was in crores. But I still felt that money was too little a thing to evaluate his worth. What is your net worth? Yes, don't let your worth be calculated, be evaluated in money. Money is too little a thing to calculate your worth. Money is because of you. You are not because of money. Let your worth be calculated in not money, but the number of lives you affect. And yes, in that respect, we are blessed to be very, very rich. So yes, always remember you are priceless and your potential is limitless. It is true, 100% true. So we now start with the interior of the nose anatomy. Now the interior of the nose is divided by the septum into two nostrils. Now each of the nostril has a lateral wall, a medial wall, that is the septum, a roof and a floor. Now whole of the anteroinferior part of the nostril is lined by the same epithelium as the outside skin. We saw that in the ear also. The outer part of the external auditory canal is lined by the same epithelium as the outside skin, the stratified squamous epithelium, hair follicles, sweat, sebaceous glands. Yes. Now here also in the nose, the lowermost part of the nostril is lined by the same epithelium as the external skin, that is stratified squamous keratinized epithelium. So we now start with the anatomy of the interior of the nose. Now the interior of the nose is divided into two nostrils by the septum. Each of the nostril has a lateral wall, a medial wall, that's the septum, a roof and a floor. Now whole of the anteroinferior part of the nostril inside is lined by the same epithelium as the outside skin, that is stratified squamous keratinized epithelium containing hair follicles, sweat and sebaceous gland. The same was in the ear also. Yes, the outer part of the external auditory canal is lined by the same thick skin as the outside, containing hair follicles, sweat, sebaceous glands. Do you remember that? Yes. So this part of the nose, which is lined by stratified squamous epithelium. Stratified squamous epithelium. This is what is known as the vestibule of nose. This is known as vestibule of nose. Otherwise, what do you think is the main lining epithelium of the nose? Wherever there is secretions, what should be the lining epithelium? Yes, wherever there is secretions, the lining epithelium should have cilia, which means that be it the nose, be it the sinuses, be it the airways, behind the nose, nasopharynx, everywhere the lining epithelium will have cilia. So the main lining epithelium of the nose is ciliated columnar pseudostratified. So the main lining epithelium, main is ciliated columnar pseudostratified epithelium. This is also known as the respiratory epithelium. And in the nose, we have another very important epithelium, and that is for olfaction. Yes, the olfactory epithelium. Where do you think inside the nose we have the olfactory epithelium? Is it present everywhere inside the nose? No, it is present only in the upper one-third of the nose. Upper one-third of the nose means upper one-third of the septum, upper one-third of the lateral wall and whole of the roof. So yes, we have the olfactory epithelium here. Olfactory epithelium that is present in the upper one-third. Now, whenever we breathe normally, like how you're breathing now, the air that you're breathing in is passing through which part of your nose inside, which part of your nostril? The upper, middle or lower part? Yes, it passes through the middle part of the nose. Whereas the olfactory epithelium lines which part of the nose? Yes, the upper one-third of the nose. So while breathing normally, only around 10 to 15% of the air reaches the upper one-third, that is olfactory epithelium. That is why whenever we have to smell something properly, what do? Sniff. Yes. Have you ever thought while sniffing why you are sniffing? No? So next time, don't just enter into a hotel or just don't open your tiffin and start sniffing without thinking these three things. So next time, whenever you sniff, these three things should come to your mind. Which three things? That when you're breathing normally, air is passing through which part of your nose? Yes, through the middle part of your nose. And how much air reaches the olfactory epithelium when you're breathing normally as of now? is only 10 to 15%. And olfactory epithelium is present in which part of the nasal cavity? The upper one-third of the nasal cavity. These three are questions that are asked in your exam. So the airway, the main airway passes through middle one-third, through middle part of the nose, middle part of nose. And only 10 to 15% reaches olfactory epithelium. So now we know what the lining epithelium of the nasal cavity is. Yes. So now you are going to quickly tell me what is this lined by. This area is lined by which epithelium? Quickly. Yes. This is lined by stratified squamous keratinized epithelium. What is this area lined by? Main lining epithelium of the nose. Yes, that is ciliated columnar pseudostratified epithelium. Very good. And what is this lined by? Yes, this is the olfactory epithelium. Now that you know the lining epithelium of the nose, now you are going to tell me where here will the furuncle of the nose be localized to? 1, 2 or 3. Where will you find a furuncle inside the nose? A furuncle of the nose will be localized only to, yes, 1, only to the vestibule. So if I say that this patient has nasal vestibulitis, what is the meaning of that? Yes, it means that the patient has a furuncle of the nose. So in this area, furuncle will be present. In this area, vestibulitis. Yes, vestibulitis. Now, once I was sitting in the OPD and with me, I think was a intern, and he was examining a patient of the ear and wrote that this patient has a ear vestibulitis. And he told me the diagnosis, this patient has ear vestibulitis. And I told him, oh my God, ear vestibulitis, immediately admit him. And later on, when I examined the patient, before admission of the patient, I found that he had a furuncle of the ear. So can you call a furuncle of the ear as vestibulitis? A furuncle of the nose is nasal vestibulitis. Yes. Can you call a furuncle of the ear as vestibulitis? Yes, no. If I say that this patient has a vestibulitis of the ear, do you remember what vestibule in the ear is? What is vestibule in the ear? Yes, vestibule is a part of the inner ear. Do you remember? Around the utricle and saccule. Yes, you cannot afford to forget. Part of bony labyrinth around the utricle and saccule. This part is vestibule. We had the 3 semicircular canals. We had the vestibule. That was a part of bony labyrinth, which means that a ear vestibulitis is a labyrinthitis, inner ear infection of the labyrinth, whereas the vestibulitis of the nose is what? It is a furuncle of the nose. Is that very clear? So in the nose, we have these 3 lining epithelium, and all of these are very important. We have to know them. So we know that in the nose, we have the lateral wall. We have the medial wall, that's the septum, we have a roof, and we have a floor. Now, we will first do the anatomy of the lateral wall of the nose. Yes, we will do the clinical anatomy. We will not only do the anatomy, but we will do the clinical significance of each and every part of the anatomy that we are seeing. And lateral wall is a very, very important wall for us. Now, why the lateral wall is very important, we will just see in some time. And what the anatomy is, we will just see in some time. Before that, I want you to have a clear idea of what the lateral wall of nose means. So this here is the lateral wall of the nose. So this is exactly how the lateral wall of my right nostril is. It is exactly like this. Now in the center, we have the septum. Now if you stand in the other nostril and see towards the septum, this is how it is going to appear. You will be able to see the septum, and when I remove the septum, now you are able to see the lateral wall. In the lateral wall are projections of 3 bones. They are known as the turbinates. The turbinate that is present most inferiorly is what is known as inferior turbinate. The one that is present in the middle is known as middle turbinate, and the one that is present superiorly is what is known as superior turbinate. So we usually have 3 turbinates, superior, middle and inferior. Sometimes is also present a 4th turbinate, which is known as a supreme turbinate. That is not a very common finding. So now let us see these 3 turbinates. Now these 3 turbinates are exactly like this, how you are seeing. The inferior turbinate is the largest. When I say largest, what do I mean? Yes, it occupies the whole of lateral wall from anterior to posterior, as you're seeing here. The middle turbinate is present a little more posteriorly. It occupies the posterior half of the lateral wall. Which means if you see it like this, it will be posteriorly. And the superior turbinate is present a little more posteriorly. It occupies the posterior 1/3 of the lateral wall. Now, in between the lateral wall and the turbinate, yes, and the turbinate, in between this area, can you see where my fingers are moving? Yes, this area in between the lateral wall and the turbinate is what is known as the meatus. So what is meatus? Meatus is in between the lateral wall and the turbinate. So in between the lateral wall and the inferior turbinate will be the area which is known as inferior meatus. In between the lateral wall and the middle turbinate, this area will be known as middle meatus. And in between the lateral wall and the superior turbinate, this area will be known as superior meatus. Or I can also say that the meatus lies lateral to the turbinate. So lateral to the inferior turbinate is the inferior meatus, lateral to the middle turbinate is the middle meatus, and lateral to the superior turbinate is the superior meatus. Now it is present exactly like this in our nose. So in my right nostril, this is the lateral wall and this is exactly how my turbinates will be present. But when you see it standing from the other nostril or from the level of the septum, then how these turbinates appear? Yes, they appear like this. Is that very clear? So here we have the septum, and once we remove the septum, we can see the lateral wall. And in the lateral wall, you can see the projections of 3 bones. What are these 3 bones known as? Yes, they are known as turbinates. So this one here is the inferior turbinate. Inferior turbinate, this is the middle turbinate, and this is the superior turbinate. Now where the turbinates end? Where the turbinates end posteriorly, that is the posterior boundary of the lateral wall of nose. Is that very clear? Which means if this is the lateral wall of nose and here we have the turbinates like this, and the turbinates suppose are ending here. This is the posterior border of the turbinates. The posterior border of all the turbinates are at the same level. The anterior border is at different level. Starting anterior most is the inferior turbinate occupying the whole of lateral wall. Little more posteriorly starts the middle turbinate and little more posteriorly is the superior turbinate. But the posterior border of all the turbinates end at the same level, and that is the end of the lateral wall of nose. Beyond that, the lateral wall of nose extends to form the lateral wall of nasopharynx. So the posterior limit of lateral wall or of the nose is the end of turbinates, posterior border of turbinates. Posterior border of turbinates. And when we remove these turbinates, this area that you're seeing that was in between the lateral wall and the turbinate which has been removed now, these are what are known as meatuses. So this is the inferior meatus. This is inferior meatus. So what you're seeing here is the meatuses. This is the inferior meatus. This is the middle meatus. And this is the superior meatus. This area is the superior meatus. So inside the nose, the turbinates are exactly like this. Can you see? It is like this. This is exactly how I showed you. And this area where I am writing 1, where I am writing 2, where I am writing 3. Can you name this? What this is? Yes, these are the meatuses. This is the inferior meatus, this is the middle meatus, and this is the superior meatus. So the meatus I can say is either in between the lateral wall and the turbinate, or I can also say that it lies lateral to the turbinate. This is lateral. So lateral, it lies lateral to the turbinates. It is lateral to the turbinates. So now any of these terms is used, don't confuse. Now I hope you have clearly understood what is the meaning of meatus, what is the meaning of turbinates. So let us quickly write this down. So how many turbinates do we have? We have the inferior turbinate. Yes, inferior turbinate is the largest. Inferior turbinate is the largest, and lateral to that is the inferior meatus. Then we have the middle turbinate. And the middle turbinate, lateral to that is the middle meatus. This occupies the posterior half of the lateral wall. And then we have the superior turbinate. This occupies the posterior 1/3 of the lateral wall. And lateral to it is the superior meatus. Now, the turbinates of the nose are also known as concha. They are known as concha. What's the meaning of concha? Sounds familiar, no? What is concha of the ear? Is concha means bowl. So, bowl of the ear, what is this? This area. Yes, so this is concha of the ear. What is concha in the nose? In the nose, the turbinates. Did you see the shape, how it is? Yes, it is like the bowl. So, it is known as concha of the nose, which means that if I tell you that this patient has a concha bullosa, then what is this patient having in the nose? Yes, this patient has a concha bullosa in the nose, which means that his concha, his turbinate is bullous. Yes, why has it become bullous? What? Did I hear hypertrophic turbinate? No, concha bullosa is not a hypertrophy of the turbinate. What is concha bullosa? Concha bullosa is pneumatization of the turbinate. Now just see here. Yes, I am going to first label and you are going to tell me what this is that I have labeled. Okay, what is this? What is this? Yes, very good. This is the inferior turbinate. And what is this? This is the middle turbinate. Now see here, when I rub it, can you see that this bone is appearing like a bone here like this? Yes, is it pneumatized inside? Is there any air inside the turbinates? No, there is no air inside the turbinate. But if it becomes pneumatized, as you are seeing here, yes, can you see air in the middle turbinate here? So this is what is known as concha bullosa, and this is a very common question that is asked in your exam. Why it is important, we'll just see, but for now, we need to know what is concha bullosa. And also, why is it not hypertrophic turbinate? What is hypertrophic turbinate? Yes, hypertrophy is external hypertrophy. External, can you see this area? Yes, normally the mucosal lining is very thin outside the turbinate, outside the bone here. The mucosal lining is very thin. But if it becomes very thick, can you see how thick it is here? See how thick it is here? So this is what is hypertrophic turbinate. Hypertrophy is an external hypertrophy. Hypertrophy is a hypertrophy of the submucosal tissues. It is not a hypertrophy, a bullous appearance because of air within the turbinate. Is that very clear? So now just see here again. I am going to mark and you are going to tell me what it is. Yes, tell me what this is. This yellow marked already. Yes, this is concha bullosa. And what is this? Yes, this is hypertrophic turbinate. Now again here. Yes, again this one is, yes, concha bullosa. This is hypertrophic turbinate. Again here, one more. Yes, this is concha bullosa. And this is again hypertrophic turbinate. Are you repeatedly noticing something? That whenever we are seeing concha bullosa, we are seeing it most commonly in which turbinate? Yes, the middle turbinate. The middle turbinate. Here also it is middle. Here also it is middle. Here also it is middle. Whereas wherever we are seeing hypertrophy, it is seen most commonly in which turbinate? Yes, the inferior turbinate. Note here. Here also it is inferior. Here also inferior. Here also inferior. Yes, so that is again another thing that is asked in exam. So what is concha bullosa? Concha bullosa is pneumatized. Pneumatized turbinate, pneumatized turbinate, whereas hypertrophic turbinate is an external hypertrophy. It is most commonly, concha bullosa is in middle turbinate. This is a very, very important question that is asked. Whereas hypertrophy is seen most commonly in inferior turbinate, again very commonly asked. And what will a concha bullosa result in? Why is it important that there is concha bullosa in this patient? If it is pneumatized, how will it make a difference? Yes, just see here. Now here we are seeing that there is concha bullosa. So now what will happen is that this concha will press on the meatus. We know that just lateral to the turbinate, this area is the meatus. And in the meatus are the opening of sinuses. What exactly are sinuses? We will just see in some time. But for now, what we are seeing is that there are openings of sinuses in the meatus, and this concha bullosa, this bullous concha, bullous turbinate has blocked the meatus, which means it has blocked the opening of the sinuses. So that will result in recurrent sinusitis. So the significance of concha bullosa is that it will result in recurrent sinusitis. In recurrent sinusitis. Whereas a hypertrophic turbinate, just see here, hypertrophic turbinate is seen most commonly in which turbinate? In the inferior turbinate. And in the inferior meatus, we do not have any opening of sinuses. Again, we will see that in some time. So when there are no openings in the inferior meatus, so a hypertrophic turbinate, will it cause any symptom? Yes. Just see here, this is occupying so much of the nose. Is there any space for air to go inside? So the hypertrophic turbinate leads to a lot of nasal obstruction. This will lead to nasal obstruction. Now also see here, this is how a concha bullosa appears, a very uniformly bullous appearance, and this is exactly how the appearance of polyp is. Yes, so a concha bullosa is confused many a times with polyp, and many of the patients that come to us in the ENT OPD with a complaint that they have polyp in the nose, they have been referred by physicians to us that this patient has a polyp in the nose, actually does not have a polyp in the nose. What does that patient have? That patient has a concha bullosa. So that is why we need to know what a concha bullosa is, and how to differentiate that we will see when we do the polyps of the nose, how to differentiate it from polyp. But this now you have to remember, and when I ask you later on that is this a concha or is this a polyp and what is concha, you should be able to tell me. Whereas a hypertrophic turbinate can be a uniform hypertrophy or it can be a very irregular hypertrophy. And when the hypertrophy is very irregular, then the turbinate has a very bumpy appearance. Somewhere there is hypertrophy, somewhere it is down, somewhere it is up, and that gives the turbinate the appearance of a mulberry. Now I have put two mulberry here. Why I have put two mulberry here? One is the raw mulberry. The other is the ripe mulberry. Why? Because in the nose there is a mass which is known as mulberry mass or strawberry mass. And then when I tell you that a hypertrophic turbinate, the appearance is like a mulberry, then you think that, okay, that mulberry or strawberry has to be red, and normally the turbinate is not very red. So what is the difference? Just see here, the mulberry turbinate that we're talking about now, that is the raw mulberry appearance of the raw mulberry. It is not a red strawberry appearance. Whereas that mulberry mass that we will do, that will be the ripe mulberry. That we will see when we do that. For now, what we are seeing is that the appearance of concha bullosa is polyp-like. It is confused with polyp. Whereas hypertrophic turbinate is mulberry. Mulberry, again it is asked, mulberry turbinate is another term for. It is mulberry like. And how do you manage? How will you manage? What will this do? Yes, a concha bullosa will lead to recurrent sinusitis. A hypertrophic turbinate will lead to nasal obstruction. So what we have to do is, now just see here, in this patient there is a concha bullosa. It is blocking the meatus. It is blocking the opening of the sinuses. So what we will do is, we will cut open this turbinate from the middle, and this lateral part, this is the lateral, this is the septum is in the center, this is the lateral part towards the lateral wall. So this lateral part of the concha which is pressing on the meatus, this part we will remove. So what have we done? We have done a partial turbinectomy. So what we have done is a partial turbinectomy. Partial turbinectomy. And hypertrophic turbinate also you remove partial part, the part that is hypertrophic or the excessive mucosa that has got hypertrophied, you remove that, you go for again a partial turbinectomy. Partial turbinectomy. Yes, always go for a partial turbinectomy. Turbinates, what is the function of turbinates? The turbinates, did you see how they have the curve, they have the concha shape? So they increase the surface area of mucosa of the nasal wall. All the turbinates are lined by mucosa all over. So that increases the surface area of mucosa of the nose, and that makes the air get exposed to a lot of mucosa, and that helps in immediate humidification, in immediate temperature regulation. The moment we breathe, in 1/4 of a second that the air takes to reach from the anterior nares to the corona, the temperature of the air gets regulated to body temperature. It gets properly humidified. Yes, that is because of the excessive surface area of the mucosa in the nasal cavity. We do not want to damage everything. We do not want to remove all the turbinates. That will be very pathological. So we always go for a partial turbinectomy. partial turbinectomy, or we go for a turbinate reduction. We reduce the hypertrophic tissue, that is known as turbinate reduction. So as of now, what do you know about the lateral wall? Yes, in the lateral wall, how many turbinates do we have? 3 turbinates. Which is the largest turbinate? Inferior, which is the smallest turbinate? Superior, which is the posterior most turbinate? Yes, again, that is a superior turbinate. What is concha bullosa? Pneumatized turbinate. Hypertrophic turbinate is seen most commonly in which turbinate? Yes, inferior turbinate. Polyp-like is concha bullosa or a hypertrophic turbinate? Yes, polyp-like is a concha bullosa. It is concha bullosa. Now, another important thing that we need to know about these turbinates are that the superior and the middle turbinates, they are parts of ethmoid bone. Whereas the inferior turbinate is an independent, separate bone. It's a totally independent bone. It is one bone. It is not a part of any bone. It is asked in your exam, inferior turbinate is a part of maxillary bone. Yes or no? Inferior turbinate is an independent bone. It is not a part of any bone. Whereas the superior and middle turbinates are parts of ethmoid bone. So now we need to know what the ethmoid bone is, how the ethmoid bone looks like, what are the other parts of the ethmoid bone in the nose, because ethmoid bone is a very, very important part of the nose, forming a lot of structures in the nose. So let us quickly see what the ethmoid bone is like. So here we have the ethmoid bone. It is a single bone on both the sides. This is the part of the ethmoid bone, the lateral part of the ethmoid bone, and this is formed by a very thin papery bone. This is known as lamina papyracea. Lamina papyracea. Why it is known as papyracea? Because it is a very thin papery bone, and this lamina papyracea separates the nose, the nasal cavity from the orbit. From the orbit. Can you make out? Yes, so here we have the lamina papyracea. We have the superior turbinate here. We have the middle turbinate. And from below, we have a bone coming up in the reverse direction. This is known as the uncinate process. So here we have, this is the superior turbinate. This is the middle turbinate. And what is this bone known as? This is known as uncinate process. Uncinate process. Now here superiorly, we have this part of the ethmoid. This forms most of the roof of the nose, and this is the bone that we have heard so many number of times. This is, yes, known as cribriform plate of ethmoid. Cribriform plate. Yes, why this is known as cribriform plate? Because here there are multiple openings. It is perforated, multiple perforations it has for the passage of the olfactory nerves from the nose to the brain. So this is known as cribriform plate of ethmoid. And from the cribriform plate hangs down a bone perpendicularly, and this bone forms a part of the septum. This forms a part of the septum. This is what is known as the perpendicular plate of ethmoid. Of ethmoid. Is that very clear? Yes, before we proceed, you are quickly going to tell me the parts of the ethmoid bone. Yes, laterally we have, yes, the lamina papyracea, superior turbinate, middle turbinate, uncinate process, cribriform plate, perpendicular plate of ethmoid. Now, in the ethmoid bone are multiple air sinuses which are known as ethmoid air sinuses. What exactly are sinuses? Yes, now sinuses develop as lateral outpouchings from the lateral wall of nose. So, the mucosa of the lateral wall of the nose outpouches laterally everywhere into the adjacent bones, and these are what are known as sinuses. Whichever bone they go into, they are named accordingly. So the lateral outpouching which goes into the maxillary bone is known as maxillary sinuses. The one that goes into the ethmoid bone is known as ethmoid sinuses. The one that goes into the frontal bone is known as frontal sinuses. The one that goes into the sphenoid bone is known as sphenoid sinuses. Now later on, these sinuses enlarge, these outpouchings enlarge and they get filled with air. And what is their function? Their function is to lighten the skull bone, so that all the skull bone is not only bone, it is well pneumatized. So it is to lighten the skull bone, and also it acts as, these sinuses, they act as resonating chambers for voice. So they are very important for the voice that we hear, the voice that we speak has a resonance, a nasal resonance. So that nasal resonance comes because of the sinuses. So which means if I ask you that the maxillary sinus is lined by which epithelium, will you be able to tell me? Maxillary sinus is lined by which epithelium? Ethmoid sinus, sphenoid, frontal, all will be lined by which epithelium? Yes, they will be lined by same epithelium as the main epithelium of the nose. What is that? Yes, ciliated columnar pseudostratified epithelium. Now here, which means that the air cells which develop into the sinuses that develop in the ethmoid bone, they are known as ethmoid air sinuses. Now the ethmoid air sinuses which are present in relation to the middle turbinate, they are known as anterior ethmoid. And the ethmoid air sinuses which are present in relation to the superior turbinate, they are known as posterior ethmoid. Yes, why are they known as posterior ethmoid? Superior turbinate is present a little posteriorly. So in relation to the superior turbinate, the air cells, the sinuses, they will be also posteriorly. So they are known as posterior ethmoids. So now that you know what the ethmoid bone is, now you are going to answer a few questions for me. Okay, ethmoid bone articulates with which bone? Superior turbinate, middle turbinate, inferior turbinate. What is your answer? Yes, all these have been questions that have been asked in your exam. Ethmoid bone articulates with, yes, what did you answer? Very good, inferior turbinate. Why not superior middle turbinate? Yes, because superior and middle turbinates are parts of ethmoid bone. So it articulates with which bone? Inferior turbinate. In which sinusitis will the pain increase with movement of eye? Yes, very good, ethmoid sinusitis. Why ethmoid sinusitis? Because ethmoid is separated from the orbit by a very thin papery bone, lamina papyracea. Now, orbit is present here. Here we have the frontal sinus, we have the ethmoid, we have maxillary sinus, and posterior to that we have the sphenoid sinus. So, orbital complications are otherwise the most common complication of sinusitis, and all this we will do in detail when we do sinusitis and its complications. Yes, for now I am telling you this, that orbital complications are the most common complications of sinusitis. In which sinusitis will orbital complication be seen most commonly? In ethmoid sinusitis, in frontal, in maxillary, or in sphenoid sinusitis? Yes, very good, in ethmoid sinusitis. Yes, again it has been asked that why ethmoid sinusitis leads to orbital complications most commonly? Because it is separated from the orbit, and in the choice this was given, because it is separated from the orbit by lamina papyracea. Is that true or false? By a thin papery bone, lamina papyracea. Is that true? Yes, that is true. So all this we will do in great detail later on, but now that we are doing this part of the anatomy, you need to know, you need to not just blandly know, okay, this is anterior ethmoid, this is ethmoid bone. You need to know why it is important to us. Why are we studying it here? Why are we not only doing sinusitis, or why are we not only doing the complications? Why are we doing the anatomy? Yes, we need to know why it is important to us as a clinician. So yes, the ethmoid sinusitis leads to orbital complications most commonly. Now, if any patient following sinusitis or following any condition develops orbital abscess, yes, orbital abscess or orbital hematoma, yes, they are very emergency conditions. Why? Yes, because the orbit all around is bony, so there is no space for expansion. So if the orbital hematoma following any surgery of the eye also, or following any surgery of the nose also, if there is a orbital hematoma, then as the blood collects in the orbit, it can cause compression of the optic nerve, and that can lead to blindness. So this is an emergency, and this has to be drained immediately. Now all the walls of the orbit are hard bony, except for which one is very thin? Yes, the lamina papyracea. So which means that if we want to immediately drain the orbit, we will have to drain it through the lamina papyracea, which means that if we have to approach the orbit through the lamina papyracea, we will have to approach the orbit through the nose. Yes or no? Yes, through the nose inside, through the lamina papyracea, we will approach the orbit to drain the orbital hematoma. to drain the orbital abscess. Is that clear? So all this makes the ethmoid anatomy very, very important. What is the roof of the ethmoid? Yes, the roof of the ethmoid is the roof of the nose. That is formed by the cribriform plate. And this cribriform plate that separates the nose from the frontal lobe above. It separates from the cranial cavity, which means that if there is any surgery that we are doing on the nose, we have to be very, very careful not to injure superiorly. That will lead to CSF leak. Not to injure laterally. Why? Because that can lead to injury of the orbit. So can you understand, this nose is fixed inside with all such important structures all around? And can you see that all these structures are separated from the nose by, yes, ethmoid bone. So all the parts of the ethmoid bone, very, very important. We need to know that. Yes, for now, if you just want to write this clinical significance, you can write, but otherwise we are going to do all this in great detail later on. But still, if you want to write, I will quickly write it down for you that yes, in ethmoid sinusitis, pain increases with movement, with eye movement. Ethmoid sinusitis leads most commonly to orbital complications. Yes, also during surgery, during nasal surgery, yes, there can be injury to orbit, there can be injury to cribriform plate injury. Yes, cribriform plate injury can lead to CSF leak. So all these are parts of the ethmoid bone, very, very important. So now before we see the ethmoid bone, how it exactly looks like, you are going to quickly tell me the parts of ethmoid bone. Yes, now tell. Now you cannot see. So now tell me quickly the parts of ethmoid bone. Start from lateral. Yes, lateral we have, very good, the lamina papyracea. Yes, you have to tell. This is not my revision. This is your revision. Yes, the lamina papyracea. Superior turbinate, middle turbinate, uncinate process. Yes, superiorly is cribriform plate, and in the center, forming a part of the septum, the perpendicular plate of ethmoid. So the ethmoid bone, as a bone, it looks like this, which we drew as the line diagram, and that was appearing so simple. So it actually appears like this. Here is the lamina papyracea forming the medial wall of the orbit. Here, this is the perpendicular plate of ethmoid. Yes, intracranially, we have a projection which is known as the crista galli. We did not do it there because that was the parts inside the nose of the ethmoid bone. Yes, here this is the middle turbinate. Yes, the superior turbinate is not very clearly visible at this level because superior turbinate arises a little more posteriorly. So that will be viewed a little more posterior, in a little more posterior cut. And from inferiorly, we have a projection of bone coming up, attaching to the ethmoid bone. That is what is known, that's the part of the ethmoid bone, that is what is known as the uncinate process. Now, what is more important for us than knowing in this bone? In this bone, it will never be asked. What is asked is the CT. And the CT is exactly how the structures are present in the nose, obviously. Yes, to get a clearer picture and the exact picture, we get the CT done. CT is it shows all the bones very, very clearly. So yes, what you are seeing here is, I will draw this and you will tell me what this is. Yes. So yes, I have drawn this complete ethmoid bone here. Yes. What is this? This is the lamina papyracea. Now I will just rub it. Yes. So what is this? This is the lamina papyracea. Now I am going to mark this. You tell me which turbinate is this. One is which turbinate? Inferior turbinate. What is 2? 2 is middle turbinate. So what is this area? This is the middle meatal area. Yes, so we are seeing some air cells here. Can you see some air cells here where I am drawing the star? Yes, what air cells are these? Yes, these are the anterior ethmoid. This whole, which I drew initially, that which I marked initially was the ethmoid bone. And what is this? Yes, this is what is this? The roof. This is the cribriform plate. Now, whenever we draw cribriform plate, we usually think that, yes, this is the roof of the nose, cribriform plate like this. So, cribriform plate is not exactly like this. It is like this. It dips down like this. Just see here carefully. Can you see that this is dipping down like this? dipping down like this. Yes, so cribriform plate is in the form of a fossa. It is in the form of a utensil. That makes it more important. It is not flat like this. So it is coming down like this, which means that it can be injured while you're operating inside the nose if you're not careful. That here we will have the cribriform plate here if you're not aware. So you have to know very, very nicely the anatomy as surgeons. Very important. Your eyes will see only what your mind knows. Yes. So now the inferior turbinate. Inferior turbinate is an independent separate bone. It is an independent bone. It is not a part of any bone. This one. Yes. Now it is not a part of any bone. It is one bone and it is attached so tightly with the lateral wall. Yes, it is so tightly with the lateral wall. Why? Because it has multiple processes which attach it to the lateral wall very, very tightly. So what are the processes of the inferior turbinate? It is attached to which bones? The inferior turbinate is attached superiorly to the ethmoid bone. It is also attached very tightly to the lacrimal bone. Yes, so here we have the maxilla, right? We have inside this area is the lacrimal bone. So the inferior turbinate is not only attached laterally to the maxilla. Yes, it is not only attached laterally to the maxilla. It is attached superiorly also. It has very tight connections. So superiorly it is attached to the lacrimal bone. It is attached to the ethmoid bone. It is attached laterally to the maxilla, the maxillary bone. And posteriorly it is attached to the palatine bone. Was that a slip of tongue? Posteriorly, it is attached to the palatine bone. Palatine bone will form the palate, na? Is that not inferiorly? No, the palatine bone forms the palate, yes. But just see here, the palatine bone actually is a L-shaped bone like this. Can you see here? This part is the horizontal part of the palatine bone. This forms a part of the palate. Whereas this is the perpendicular plate of the palatine bone like this. Yes, so posteriorly it is attached to the palatine bone. So it is asked in your exam that the inferior turbinate articulates with which bones? It articulates with so many bones. So it has multiple processes. It has the maxillary process. So it attaches to the maxilla. It attaches to the ethmoid bone. It attaches to the lacrimal bone. The maxillary bone, the ethmoid bone, the lacrimal bone. Posteriorly, it attaches to the palatine bone, perpendicular plate of palatine bone. Okay, so now before we proceed, you are going to quickly tell me, yes, which is the largest turbinate? Inferior turbinate. Inferior turbinate is a part of maxillary bone. True, false? No, it is an independent separate bone. Superior and middle turbinate is a part of which bone? Ethmoid bone. What are the other parts of ethmoid bone in the nose other than superior and middle turbinates? Yes, lamina papyracea, cribriform plate, perpendicular plate of ethmoid, and the uncinate process. What is concha bullosa? Yes, concha bullosa is pneumatized turbinate. Pneumatized turbinate or concha bullosa is seen most commonly in which turbinate? Middle turbinate, whereas hypertrophic turbinate is most commonly seen in inferior turbinate. Mulberry turbinate is another name for hypertrophic turbinate. Yes. So now that we have seen what the turbinates are, now when we remove the turbinates, lateral to the turbinates, what is that area known as? Yes, that is what is known as meatus. So here we have the turbinates. When we will remove these turbinates, we will have the meatuses. So now can you tell me which will be the largest meatus? Which is the largest turbinate? Yes, largest turbinate is the inferior. So don't tell me the answer largest meatus as middle. Largest meatus is inferior meatus. The middle meatus is the most congested meatus. It is not the largest. Yes, please remember that. It is asked in your exam. So why it is the most congested, that we will see sometime. For now, what we are seeing is the largest meatus is the inferior meatus. So we will start first from the inferior meatus. This here is the inferior meatus. Inferior meatus. So if we see in this picture, can you tell me where is the inferior meatus? Yes, this area. This area is the inferior meatus. This is the inferior meatus. Now in the inferior meatus, no sinus is open. Then what opens in the inferior meatus? Yes, in the inferior meatus is the opening of the nasolacrimal duct. When I say nasolacrimal duct, the name itself tells you that it is connecting the nose to lacrimal. What? Lacrimal sac. So yes, it connects the nose to the lacrimal sac. The nose to the lacrimal sac. And what is the significance of this nasolacrimal duct? Yes, it drains the secretions of the eye into the nose. So whenever you cry, you start doing like this. Yes, why? Because whenever the tearing is more, then all that through the nasolacrimal duct gets drains into the nostril. Now what happens sometimes is that this nasolacrimal duct gets blocked. Now when it gets blocked, what will happen? All the secretions will now not be able to go through the nasolacrimal duct. It will not be able to drain. So now in the lacrimal sac, all the secretions will collect, and wherever the secretions will collect, they will get infected. So that is what is known as dacrocystitis. So now the patient develops dacrocystitis. How will you manage this condition? Yes, for that, the patency of the nasolacrimal duct needs to be maintained. For that, what is done? Yes, you must have read in ophtha that what you do is you pass a syringe through the inferior puncta, you force saline through the nasolacrimal duct, and the nasolacrimal duct opens. Now, if by syringing also, if it does not open, then what we do is that we connect the lacrimal sac, we open the lacrimal sac directly into the nostril so that the secretions drain through this connection. Now, earlier, this used to be done as an external approach. From outside, the incision used to be given in the skin. The lacrimal sac used to be exposed, and the lacrimal sac used to be connected to the nostril inside. It used to be connected. That was known as dacrocystorhinostomy. That was known as external dacro is the lacrimal sac. So dacrocystorhinostomy. You are making the lacrimal opening, rhinostomy, opening it inside the nose, rhinostomy. Now when this lacrimal sac was opened inside in the nose, yes, it was directly opened inside the nose. So it was seen that where this opening lies is just in front of the middle turbinate. Yes, so now after the advent of endoscopes, this is done as a endoscopic procedure. It is no more done externally. Now it is done as an endoscopic procedure through the endoscope, where you make the opening. First it was made from the outside inside. Now it is made from the in outside. So where exactly do you have to make the opening? You have to make the opening just anterior to this here is the middle turbinate that we are seeing. So this is the middle turbinate. Just anterior to the middle turbinate here, you make the opening, and where does it open into? Directly, that is the area of the lacrimal sac. This is known as endoscopic DCR, dacrocystorhinostomy. Now also what happens in infants is that the nasolacrimal duct is already very narrow. So if they develop rhinitis, the nasolacrimal duct gets blocked, and the child develops watery eyes. Now, even if the rhinitis is over, the lacrimal duct usually remains blocked. And then the parents come to you with a complaint that the child has watery eyes. Even when the child is not crying, the child all the time has watery eyes. So what do you have to do in this case? Will you do syringing? In this case, will you do dacrocystorhinostomy? No. All you have to do is you have to advise the parents to do a lacrimal sac massage in the direction of the nasolacrimal duct. This is what is known as Krigler's massage, and for that you need to know what is the direction of the nasolacrimal duct, and that is a question that is asked in your exam. What is the direction of nasolacrimal duct? Yes, so can you tell me what the direction is? How will you advise the massage? Yes, obviously it has to be downwards, laterally, and backwards. So how many nasolacrimal duct do we have? 2. So just remember it as double. DBL. This is downwards, backwards, and this is laterally. Downwards, backwards, and laterally. So yes, what do we know about the inferior meatus? Yes, inferior meatus is the largest meatus. What else we know? Yes, it occupies the whole of the lateral wall from anterior to posterior, just like the inferior turbinate. And in the inferior meatus, we have a very, very important opening. What is that opening? Yes, that is the opening of the nasolacrimal duct. Where exactly are we going to find this opening? See, it is the largest meatus. So it is extending from anterior till the posterior most part of the nose. So where should we look for the opening of the nasolacrimal duct? Yes, that is present just at the junction of the anterior 1/3 and posterior 2/3. So junction of anterior 1/3 and posterior 2/3. What is that junction? That is this area. So this here is the opening of the nasolacrimal duct present, or we can also remember that this is just below the highest point of the inferior turbinate. Yes, just see here. Just see, can you make out what the highest point is? Yes, can you make out this is the highest point? Yes, so just below the highest point of the inferior turbinate. So quickly let us write this down. Yes, the inferior turbinate is the largest. So the inferior meatus is also the largest. And in the inferior meatus, we have the opening of the nasolacrimal duct. What's the direction? Now you will have to tell me what's the direction. Yes, it is double. Downwards, backwards, laterally. Where exactly does it open? Yes, it opens just below the highest point. Below the highest point. Highest point, or you can remember it as it opens at the junction of anterior 1/3 and posterior 2/3. And at the opening, it is bounded by a valve. And the name of that valve is valve of Hassner. It is known as Hassner's valve. Hassner or valve of Hassner. Valve of Hassner. Now let us see the endoscopic appearance of the inferior turbinate, the inferior meatus and the nasolacrimal duct. Now, as I told you, what we will be doing is the clinical anatomy, and the endoscopic pictures, the CT of the nose, are a regular question in your exam. So we will not be doing it as a separate section. We will be doing it where it is clinically relevant so that you exactly understand what you are reading about. So before we see the endoscopic images, what is the endoscope that we use to do nasal endoscopy? So the nasal endoscopy is what is known as, when we do to investigate the diseases, is known as diagnostic nasal endoscopy, or it is known as DNE, and it is done either with the help of rigid endoscope or flexible endoscope. Now this is how the rigid endoscopes look like. Now just note here there is a marking, a red color, and a marking 30 degrees. Here there is a marking which is green color and a marking which is 0 degrees. So yes, they come in different colors, and these colors tell you the angulation. Now the angulation is what is mentioned here, 0 degree, 30 degree, but many a times with time, the mentioning of the 0 degree and 30 degree, they become very faded. So, and also during surgery, when we are operating, we will not just bring the endoscopes close to us and see what is written, whether it is 0 degree, whether it is 30 degree. We just have to see the endoscope and know which endoscope we are picking up next while we are operating. So this color codes are for just identifying, having a look at the endoscope and identifying which is the angle of the endoscope. What is the meaning of angle? I will just tell you. Before that, we need to know that there are 4 types of angles of these endoscopes. And how do you remember it? We remember it as gray. G-R-A-Y. Just instead of A, write B. Okay. So G is green, the color code. R is red. B is black. And Y is yellow. And what are these angles? Green is 0 degree. Red is 30 degree. Black is 45 degrees. And yellow is 70 degrees. Now what are these degrees? Now when we have put the endoscope inside the nostril, if it is 0 degree means that the angle is straight. Yes. So here you will get an end-on view. You will get a view of what is just present in front of it. Now in the nose, the sinuses are present laterally. If I introduce the endoscope like this, and if I just get an endo on view, I will just be able to see what is in front of it. How am I able to see? How will I be able to see what is laterally, that is inside the sinuses, inside the metasis? For that, I need a endoscope which has an angle. So suppose it has an angle like this. So I will be able to see, the light will go like this. I will be able to see the structures that are present here. Yes. So if it has an angle which is like this, so in that case, I will be able to see the structures which are present here inferiorly. Yes. Which means that this exactly how the nose is. CT gives you the exact picture of the nose. So here I have passed one endoscope. Now if it is a 0 degree, I will be able to see only this part, right? Now I want to see the sinuses also. So I want it to be angulated. I want the end to be angulated. And how much angulation I want, whether I want 30 degree, whether I want 30 degree, or whether I want 45 degrees. Yes, so accordingly I can use the endoscope. So I think you have understood what's the meaning of 0 degree, 30 degree, 45 degrees. Now this rigid endoscopy has to be done while the patient is lying down. It cannot be done when the patient is sitting like in front of you inside the nose. You cannot put this. We know all around the nose are such important structures. Here we have the orbit, here we have the cribriform plate. Yes, so you have to first anesthetize the nose. You will anesthetize the nose either by a local spray, anesthetic spray, nasal spray, or by putting nasal packs which are soaked in anesthetic. And after that, you are going to do endoscopy while the patient is lying down. Endoscopy can also be done with the help of flexible endoscopes, and this you can do when the patient is sitting also in front of you. Yes, they are flexible, they are soft structures, not like the hard, rigid endoscopes. So here the flexible endoscopy can also be done. Now this is how the endoscopic pictures appear, and the endoscopic pictures are very frequently asked in your exam, so you should know what you are seeing in the endoscopic picture. Now if it is a normal anatomy that has been given, normal picture that has been given without any mass or without any abnormality, then the first thing that you should be able to identify is which wall is the one that you are seeing, which is which wall. For example, which wall is this? Is this a lateral wall? And which wall is this? Is this the lateral wall or is this the septum? We know that one will be the lateral wall, the other will be the septum. And we also know that the lateral wall will be the one where we will be seeing the turbinates. And we also know that the turbinates are projections which are separate from the lateral wall, right? So if there is a continuous structure that you are seeing, you're not seeing anything outpouching separately from it. So that is what is the septum. So here we can see this is the septum, and we can also see that there is a slight deviation of the septum inferiorly. That is also we can make out this deviation is appearing like a bulge in the septum only. It is not appearing as separate from the septum. Let us just see here. Can you see this projection? This projection is appearing as separate from the lateral wall. You can see the lower edge also. Same you can see here. This is appearing as separate from the wall. So this is what is the turbinate. We know turbinates arise from the lateral wall. So this wall is the lateral wall. So this is the first thing that you should be able to identify whenever you are seeing a normal picture. Now whenever it is any disease that is shown, for example, any mass in the nose, then in that case all the anatomy will be distorted. You are not supposed to then try to identify which is the turbinate, which is the lateral wall, which is the septum. So this is only for the normal anatomy, like was a picture given, endoscopic picture, a very similar picture, and was marked like this. This arrow was given and was asked that what is this structure that has been marked. So what is this? Yes, this is the inferior turbinate. So we can see this is the floor here. This is the floor. So this is the septum. This is the turbinate. Which turbinate is this? This is the inferior turbinate that you are seeing. This is the middle turbinate. And what is this? This is the right nostril. The patient will be in front of you. So this will be the right side of the patient and this will be the left side of the patient. So when you are introducing the endoscope like this, you are seeing the turbinate here. This is the lateral wall. So that is the right nostril. And when you're seeing the turbinates on this side, this is the lateral wall, that is the left nostril. Okay, so here what is the structure that you're seeing? Which one is the lateral wall and which is the septum? Yes, we can see this is the turbinate that is coming out. So this has to be the lateral wall. This will be the lateral wall and here this will be the septum. So now we have lifted the this turbinate. Which turbinate is this? Yes, this is the inferior turbinate. We have lifted the inferior turbinate. inferior turbinate, and what we are viewing is this three-dimensional area. This is the inferior meatus. Now in the inferior meatus, what is the opening that we have? Yes, we have the opening of the nasolacrimal duct. And where exactly will we find it? Will we find it towards the anterior part, or towards the middle, or towards the posterior part? Yes, anterior part, junction of anterior 1/3 and posterior 2/3. So somewhere here, yes, we can see a little opening like structure. So let us come a little closer, and yes, we can see this a little more clearly. So yes, that is the opening of the nasolacrimal duct, and a little more closer, yes, we can see exactly the opening of the nasolacrimal duct. Nasolacrimal duct here is bounded by a valve. What is the name of that valve? Yes, that is known as valve of Hassner. We already know that. Now let us quickly have a look at the endoscopic video, where you will see the inferior turbinate and you will see the inferior meatus, the nasolacrimal duct opening in the inferior meatus, and also the patency of the nasolacrimal duct will be shown here. So now let us see how the inferior turbinate, the inferior meatus and the nasolacrimal duct appear on endoscopic examination. So this is the left nostril where we are going to do the endoscopy. By now, are you able to make out which is the lateral wall and which is the septum? Yes, we know that the turbinates arise from the lateral wall and they are totally separate from the lateral wall. So yes, this here is the inferior turbinate, and that there is the septum. We can see that this septum is deviated inferiorly. Yes, so now let us quickly see how on endoscopy the inferior turbinate appears. So now the endoscope is being passed through the floor of the nose. That we can see is the inferior turbinate, and we can see it is extending throughout the lateral wall of the nose. So it is the largest turbinate. So now the endoscope is being passed in the inferior meatus, lateral to the inferior turbinate, and we can see very clearly the opening of the nasolacrimal duct. And yes, we can see it is patent. It is opening. All the secretions are coming out through the nasolacrimal duct. Yes, can you tell me where it opens? Yes, at the junction of the anterior 1/3 and the posterior 2/3 of the inferior turbinate. Now that we have done the inferior meatus and we know everything about the inferior meatus, now let us come to the next important meatus for us, and that is the middle meatus. Yes, middle meatus is a very, very important meatus for us because it has the maximum number of opening of the sinuses. Yes, the middle meatus is the most congested meatus. It is not the largest. When you know how many sinuses open in the middle meatus, when it is asked which is the largest meatus, you write it as middle meatus. No, the largest meatus is the inferior meatus. Middle meatus is the most congested meatus. So why it is the most congested? Because we have large number of openings of many sinuses here. Which sinuses open? All the anterior group of sinuses, they open together in the middle meatus. So what are the anterior group of sinuses? Yes, we have the frontal, we have the anterior ethmoid, and we have the maxillary. All these are known as anterior group of sinuses. They open together in the middle meatal area. Now before we exactly see these sinuses, let us understand how exactly the middle meatus is, and then we will see the pictures, we will understand that better. So here, suppose this here is the lateral wall. From the lateral wall arises the middle turbinate. Now this area here in between the lateral wall and the middle turbinate, this is what is the middle meatal area. So now I have removed the middle turbinate, and what I am seeing is the middle meatal area. Now in the middle meatus, superiorly is a bulge that is produced by most prominent anterior ethmoidal cell. Remember, I told you that in the middle meatus open all the anterior group of sinuses. Which are the anterior group? The frontal, anterior ethmoid and the maxillary. So the most prominent anterior ethmoidal cell produces a bulge here in the middle meatus. This is a bulge of the ethmoid, so it is known as bulge. So bulla of the ethmoid, so ethmoidalis, bulla ethmoidalis. From inferiorly comes the sickle-shaped bone. Yes, this is a part of the ethmoid. Can you tell me the name? Yes, this is the uncinate process. So this is exactly like this in my lateral wall, in my middle meatal area. So here is the middle turbinate. If I remove that, just lateral to that is this middle meatus, where we will see exactly this picture. Yes, this three-dimensional picture. Now, can you see a gap in between the bulla superiorly and the uncinate inferiorly? This gap, this is a semilunar opening, so it is known as hiatus, semilunar in shape, so semilunaris. And when you enter through the hiatus semilunaris, you enter into this area where my thumb is moving. Yes, this area in between the uncinate and the lateral wall, this is what is known as infundibulum. I repeat, bulla ethmoidalis. This here is the uncinate process. This is the hiatus semilunaris through which you enter into this area. This is the infundibulum. Now when we see in the picture, because that picture is going to be a two-dimensional picture. So when you see the picture now, you will understand it very clearly now. So yes, what are we seeing here? This here is the septum. This is the septum. This is the lateral wall. In the lateral wall, here we have the middle turbinate here. This is the inferior turbinate. This is the middle turbinate. So this is the middle turbinate, and this area lateral to the middle turbinate is the middle meatal area, in which superiorly we are seeing this bulge. This is a bulge of the ethmoid, most prominent anti-ethmoidal cell. This is known as bulla ethmoidalis. So this is bulla ethmoidalis, bulla ethmoidalis, ethmoidalis. Yes, inferiorly we have this bone, a part of the ethmoid. What is that? Yes, that is the uncinate process, and this gap. Now let me mark that with green here. So I am drawing a star here like this. This gap is what is known as the hiatus semilunaris. So this is what is hiatus opening, semilunar shape, semilunaris. And through the hiatus semilunaris, now let me change the hiatus into an arrow. Yes, through the hiatus semilunaris, you enter into this area. Yes, this area, this is what is in between the uncinate process, and the lateral wall. This area is what is known as the infundibulum. Infundibulum. Now that you are seeing what the infundibulum is, now let me just rub this so that you can get a clearer picture. So now that you are seeing what the infundibulum is, now are you able to make out that the maxillary sinus opens directly into the infundibulum? Yes, many a times in your question when it is asked that maxillary sinus opens in which meatus, the middle meatus is not there in the choice. Then what is there in the choice? Yes, infundibulum is there in the choice. So yes, it opens in the infundibulum of the middle meatus. So we are seeing this, the maxillary sinus opening here in the infundibulum. Here we have the anterior ethmoid. Yes, anterior ethmoid is also open in the middle meatus. Yes, and where's the frontal? High up here. This is the frontal sinus opening here above the bulla, and this is this opening, this tract. Where is the frontal sinus? Frontal sinus is here. Yes, it drains into the middle meatus, which is lower down. So how does it open? This tract is what is known as frontonasal duct. This is frontonasal duct, more commonly nowadays known as frontal recess. So this is what is known as frontal recess. Frontal recess or frontonasal duct or frontonasal duct. Yes, when it is asked frontonasal duct opens in which meatus, you just see the duct and immediately mark inferior meatus. Yes, so this is not nasolacrimal duct. So always read properly before answering. This is frontonasal duct. This opens in the middle meatus. Now, all the structures of the middle meatus along with the openings in the middle meatus is together known as a complex. It is known as osteomeatal complex. Ostia means opening into the meatus, complex. Why is it one complex? Yes, because if anything happens here, happens together. If there is sinusitis of one sinus, for example, if there is sinusitis of maxillary sinus, it will ultimately, because they have a common drainage area, so ultimately it will lead to ethmoid sinusitis, it will lead to frontal sinusitis. If there is a concha bullosa, what is that? Concha bullosa? Yes, it is pneumatized turbinate. Seen most commonly in which turbinate? Yes, the middle turbinate. And if there is a concha of the middle turbinate, so now what will happen? It will be bullous like this. It will block the drainage of the middle meatus. It will lead to all the three sinusitis. So whatever happens here happens together. So it is known as a complex. Now suppose there is a patient who has a sinusitis of the maxillary sinus, of the ethmoid, of the frontal, and I want to operate on the sinuses. Now, why is the lateral wall important for us? Yes, the lateral wall is important for us because in the lateral wall there are multiple openings. Yes, what are these openings of? Usually, mostly they are the openings of the sinuses. And these sinuses, because they are the openings through which the lateral wall communicates, through which the nose communicates with the sinuses. So any infection of the nose through these openings can also go into the sinuses, and that can cause sinusitis. So which means that if there is any infection of the sinuses, then these sinuses, which have a normal function of lightening the skull bone, of nasal resonance, they start creating problem for us. That is when we say that this patient has sinusitis, infection and inflammation of the sinuses. So now is when we need to approach these sinuses. So where will we approach these sinuses? Yes, through the lateral wall. So we have to know exactly where in the lateral wall are the openings of these sinuses. For example, if I want to approach the maxillary sinus, I will have to go through exactly which meatus I have to know. Will I go through the inferior meatus to reach the maxillary sinus? No, I will have to go through middle meatus. Frontal, again middle meatus. Anterior ethmoid, again middle meatus. And how do I approach the middle meatus? How do I approach the sinuses? How do I approach it? Yes, I will not give a big incision externally. I approach it endoscopically through the nose inside. So these sinus surgeries are done endoscopically. And this surgery is what is known as FES, functional endoscopic sinus surgery, and we will do FES in great detail later on. For now, what I am telling you is that we operate the sinuses by a surgery which is known as FES. FES is functional. E is endoscopic because we are doing it with endoscope. Sinus, we are operating on the sinus, so it is sinus surgery. Functional endoscopic sinus surgery. Functional. Why? Because we are restoring the function of ventilation and drainage of the sinuses. We are opening. All this area is blocked. Osteometrial complex is blocked, because of which the ventilation, the drainage of sinus is hampered. So we are restoring that normal function of ventilation and drainage. So now we are operating this patient who has had a block of the osteometrial complex area. The sinuses, all the three sinuses are not able to drain. That is leading to sinusitis in the patient. How do I operate? With endoscope. Which endoscope will I use? Will I use a rigid endoscope or a flexible endoscope? Think and tell me. Flexible? No, rigid endoscope. Why not a flexible endoscope? Yes, a flexible endoscope, we know it is flexible. You know, it is like a wire. If we are holding this endoscope with both the hands, which hand are we going to operate? Both our hands are busy now. Yes. So whenever we operate, we use the rigid endoscope. Yes, so okay, we are using the rigid endoscope. With one hand, we are holding the endoscope, and with the other hand, we are operating. Yes, the dominant hand we use for operating, and the non-dominant hand we hold the endoscope. So which means that we are using a rigid endoscope. Very good. But just see this area of the middle meatus. How will we go through the rigid endoscope like this? Not possible. How will we go from here like this? How will we go from here like this? That is not at all possible. Yes, so whenever we do FES, the first step for FES is always to remove this uncinate process. First step is uncinectomy. Once you have removed the uncinate process, yes, now there is no more this separation. Can you now very easily from here go into the maxillary sinus? Yes. Can you very easily now approach the ethmoid and again the frontal? Yes. So the first step for FES, very, very important question. First step for FES is uncinectomy. Now, once was this question asked, first step for FES, and again it was repeated many times, and then after a few years, what was asked was first step for infundibulotomy. Yes, what is infundibulotomy? And then you thought, my God, what is this new question? What is infundibulotomy? Infundibulotomy means you are opening the infundibulum. What is infundibulum? Infundibulum is this area. This is the area of infundibulum. So if you are opening it, means what are you doing? You have to go for an uncinectomy. That is what you are doing when you are doing uncinectomy. You are opening the infundibulum. So whether it is uncinectomy or whether it is infundibulotomy, yes, you have to go for a uncinectomy. Whether you want to go for a infundibulotomy, whether you are doing a FES, that is the first step, uncinectomy. Now also has been asked, what are the boundaries of the infundibulum? Infundibulum is what area it is bounded by? Yes, now you will have to tell me what? It is in between what? Yes, it is in between the uncinate process and the lateral wall. So infundibulum is in between. It is in between the uncinate process and the lateral wall. And what opens directly in the infundibulum? Yes, the maxillary sinus. Okay, so we are going to quickly write down. Yes, the middle turbinate occupies the posterior half. We already know that. Yes, it is the most congested meatus. Why the most congested? Middle meatus is the most congested. Why it is the most congested? Because we have the openings of 3 sinuses here. Which sinuses? We have the maxillary sinus here. We have the anterior ethmoid. And we have the frontal sinus. And all these 3 together, along with the structures of the middle meatus, is known as osteomeatal complex. So now let us see how the CT of the osteomeatal complex will appear. It will appear exactly like how it is present in the nose. Yes, so we can see here, this here is the maxillary sinus. So yes, it is opening where? What is this area? Now you will tell me this. Yes, this is the infundibulum. And what is this here? Yes, this is the uncinate process. This is the middle turbinate. We can see a little concha here. Yes, concha, little concha. What is this here? Yes, this is the bulla ethmoidalis. And what is this area? This. Yes, this in between the bulla superiorly and the uncinate inferiorly. This is the hiatus semilunaris. So now I am going to mark 1, 2, 3, 4 and you will tell me quickly what this is. Yes, first here. What is this? 1. Yes, septum. Very good. What is this? 2. Inferior turbinate. Is the inferior turbinate hypertrophic here? Yes or no? Yes. And what's the appearance of a hypertrophic inferior turbinate known as? Mulberry appearance. Very good. What is 3? Yes, this is the middle turbinate. Yes, what is this? Yes, maxillary sinus. What is this? 4? Yes, the uncinate process. 5. Bulla ethmoidalis. What is this? This hiatus semilunaris. And what is 6 here? 6. What is this? Yes, this is the infundibulum. Yes, so if any of these, the CT is repeatedly asked in your exam, so this you saw is so easy. So here we are seeing in this patient that the osteomeatal complex area, this is blocked here, the drainage is blocked. Because of this, there is all secretions in the maxillary sinus. So this is the patient who has developed maxillary sinusitis. Now how am I going to approach this? How am I going to restore the ventilation and drainage of the maxillary sinus? Yes, by FES. And what will be the first step for FES here? Yes, to remove the uncinate process. I will remove this uncinate process. Yes, just see here. Here we had the uncinate process like this. Yes, so now uncinate process has been removed and this is post-surgery CT. So what you are seeing here is that there is no more uncinate process. So how easily, when you would have removed the uncinate process, you could have entered into the maxillary sinus. And yes, also into the osteomeatal complex area here. Yes, we can see the bulla. This has been opened. This is a post-surgery, post-FES CT. So you cannot see the bulla as bulla because all the bulla has been opened and all the disease has been removed from the air cells. So you can see how this area becomes so patent when the uncinectomy is done. Having seen the CT, now let us see how the endoscopic appearance appears, which I have told you yes, these are asked very commonly in your exam. So yes, first thing is to identify what is the structures that we are seeing here. So can you tell me what is the lateral wall and what's the septum? Yes, tell me this. This is the lateral wall or this is the septum? Yes, we can see separate projection. This is the turbinate. So yes, this is the lateral wall and this here what we are seeing is the septum. Yes, the septum we can see a bulge here. So this is a deviation of the septum. Don't confuse this. This is not the turbinate. You can see how separate the turbinate appears like. So this here is the lateral wall. So yes, this is the inferior meatus and this area is the middle turbinate. So this will be the area of the middle meatus. We know that the meatus is lateral to the turbinates. So now we go closer. And when we go closer, we are having a look at the middle meatal area. All this is the middle meatal area. In this, just note here, this bone this bone, this is what is known as the uncinate process. Obviously, it is covered with mucosa. So this is the uncinate process, and you can see this area. Let us have a closer view. So this is the uncinate process. This is the middle turbinate, the uncinate process, and here you can see a glimpse of the bulla. Yes. So a further closer view we have here, and yes, please note here what is this. Now you will have to tell me what is this. Yes, we have retracted the middle turbinate to one side. So now we can see the middle meatal area in which, yes, very good, this is the uncinate process. What is this? Yes, this is the bulla, the most prominent anti-8th model cell. And in between the bulla and the uncinate, what is this gap known as? Yes, this gap is what is known as the hiatus semilunaris. Yes, just see here, this probe has been passed into the hiatus, through the hiatus semilunaris. So where has the probe reached? Yes, it is into this area, that is the infundibulum inside. Yes, infundibulum, which is covered with the uncinate process in this patient. So now if I want to expose the ostia of the maxillary sinus, to remove disease from the maxillary sinus and to widen the maxillary sinus ostia, I will have to go for uncinectomy. Yes, so what I do is this uncinate process, I will give the incision, or with different instruments. I will just show it to you. Yes, we remove the uncinate process. So here we are removing the uncinate process, which means now when I have removed, when I remove, what will be this area where I am entering into? Yes, that is the infundibulum. So now let us quickly see a video showing the endoscopic anatomy of the middle meatus, how exactly middle meatus appears. And also what we are going to see is how uncinectomy is done, and how when uncinectomy is done, all the area of the osteometal complex appears very clear to us. Now let us quickly see the endoscopic anatomy of the middle meatus. So this is the left nostril that we will be visualizing. So now let me orient you. So this is the middle turbinate that you are seeing. And lateral to the middle turbinate, this area is the middle meatal area. We already know what the structures in the middle meatal area are. Now quickly let us have a look how they look in the real live picture. So now we can see the uncinate process. And yes, the probe is touching the uncinate process. You can see it very clearly now. So when we remove the uncinate process, that is what is known as uncinectomy. The infundibulum will be opened once we remove the uncinate process. So that is also known as infundibulotomy. And in the infundibulum is the opening of the maxillary sinus ostia directly. So now the probe is touching the largest anti-8th model cell, bulla ethmodalis. And yes, now it is in the hiatus semilunaris, through which it is entering into the infundibulum. We have read all this very clearly. We are now seeing it live, how it looks. So this is, yes, the uncinate process. It is a little prominent in this patient. And yes, that is the bulla. We have come very close to the bulla. And this is the backbiting forceps. We are now going to do a uncinectomy. So it opens towards the back, and it will remove the uncinate process in chunks, in bits, in bites. And we will remove the uncinate process till we are able to visualize the maxillary sinus ostia opening into the infundibulum. The probe is being passed into the infundibulum, and very soon we will be able to see the maxillary sinus ostia. Yes, can you get a glimpse of the ostia there? Yes, so we are getting the glimpse of the maxillary sinus ostia, and the ostia is being widened now. That is what we do. We widen the maxillary sinus ostia so that the ventilation and the drainage of the sinus is helped. And now through the maxillary sinus ostia, we will be also able to see the complete maxillary sinus from the inside very beautifully. So bits of uncinate process which were left are being removed. And we are very close to the ostia. And yes, we are using an angled endoscope. Now you understand why we need an angled endoscope. So we are able to see the inside of the maxillary sinus so clearly, the whole of the maxillary sinus. So if there is disease inside that, the whole of the disease is removed. The maxillary sinus is flushed so that all the disease is out, and the ostia is now wide open. Following the surgery of functional endoscopic sinus surgery, now the patient's middle meatus, maxillary sinus ostia is properly ventilated and it is properly draining. Now we will go up more anteriorly, and yes, there we are able to visualize the frontal sinus opening. Yes, so clear it is. Yes, that is the frontal recess, also known as the frontonasal duct. These forceps are what are known as Black-Kesley's forceps, and they are used very commonly in FES. And we can see that the upper part of uncinate process, which was left behind, is now being removed. So what is being shown to you is that the first step for any functional endoscopic sinus surgery, FES, is uncinectomy. Following that, once you have removed the uncinate, you can access the maxillary sinus ostia and the maxillary sinus, remove the disease from there. You can now very clearly, can you see, you can open up all the anterior ethmoidal air cells. The bulla ethmoidalis has been opened here, and you can remove disease from the anterior ethmoids. And also above we have the frontal sinus opening, so we can also remove disease from the frontal sinus. So all these structures of the middle meatus together are known as the osteomeatal complex. You can see how close together they are. Now we can see that this middle meatal area, this is a very narrow area. Now, if there is so much of disease in this area, then when we remove all the disease, if there are polyps coming from this area, when we remove all the polyps, ultimately, whether we want or we do not want, then there are raw surfaces created on this surface also and this surface also. Means both the surfaces of the lateral wall as well as the surface which is close to the lateral wall of the middle turbinate. Both become raw. When we pull out all the disease, obviously the surfaces, the mucosal surface on both the sides gets removed. So both are now raw. Now following surgery, what will happen again? They will come very close to each other and they will result in synechia. Why did we operate this patient? Yes, because this patient was having chronic sinusitis. Why chronic sinusitis? Because of block of the osteomeatal complex, and we have done the surgery, and following surgery, see what has happened. Synechia is formed. So again, this patient has a blocked osteomeatal complex. Again, this patient will have recurrent sinusitis, chronic sinusitis. Yes, so whenever we operate in this area, it is mandatory that following FES, we always put a pack. We always put a pack in the middle meatal area so that these two surfaces are separated from each other, and this pack is removed after 4 to 5 days. Till this time, the healing of the mucosa occurs and the chances of synechia is not there. And also it is asked that what is the drug that we impregnate in this pack to reduce synechia formation? Yes, this is mitomycin C. Mitomycin C, again this has been a repeated question. Mitomycin C is used for which conditions of the nose, which surgeries of the nose? One is this, I am telling you, in FES it is used. Now you are going to tell me another surgery. Another surgery of the nose we have already done, and you promised me that time that you will tell me. Yes, in corneal atresia. In corneal atresia also, when we are operating, that's a very narrow area, posterior nasal apertures, and that too in an infant. Yes, so we have to always use mitomycin C to reduce synechia formation. And the forceps that you saw in the video, yes, these are the two forceps that we use very commonly for FES, and yes, these can be asked in your exam. The one which you saw was, this is the Black-Kesley forceps. So it has got an opening here at the tip. You can see how the tip opens. Tip opens like the mouth of a shark. Yes, only the mouth opens. It is not that the whole forceps is opening like the scissors. Only the tip opens. And here, this can be of different angulations, because we know that when we are putting the forceps into the nostril, we want to remove structures from here also. We want to remove the disease from here also. So they come in different angulations. And the other is the backbiting forceps, and you already saw how the backbiting forceps is used. This opens on the outside. Usually rest of the forceps open like scissors like this, whereas this forceps opens behind. It opens behind like this. Yes, so that in the lateral wall, suppose this is the lateral wall here. In the lateral wall, we have the opening of the maxillary sinus, and all this is blocked, and I want to widen the opening of the maxillary sinus. Now, if I want to open it from superiorly, I will want a forceps which opens like this. But if I want to open it from inferiorly, we know that while we are doing FES, we do not want to go so much of superior thing we do not want to do. Yes, we have the orbit also, we have the cruciform plate also. So we can, if we want to widen, we usually widen it inferiorly. That is a very safe area. So if we want to widen inferiorly, so for that we have the backbiting forceps. So this backbiting forceps will open inferiorly like this. So we will engage it with the ostia, with the opening, and we will remove a chunk like this and we will widen the ostia opening. We will widen the opening of the maxillary sinus. So that is backbiting portion. Okay, so quickly tell me which is the most congested meatus? Middle meatus. Which is the largest meatus? Inferior meatus. The nasolacrimal duct opens in nasolacrimal duct, inferior. The frontonasal duct opens in middle meatus. Maxillary sinus opens in middle meatus. Anterior ethmoid open in anterior ethmoid. Yes, again middle meatus. All the structures of middle meatus are known as osteometal complex. What is the first step of S? Uncinectomy. What is the first step for infundibulotomy? Uncinectomy. Maxillary sinus opens in which area of the middle meatus? Yes, the infundibulum. What is hiatus semilinaris then? Hiatus semilinaris is in between bulla superiorly and inferiorly is the uncinate process. Uncinate process is a part of which bone? Ethmoid bone. Now coming to the superior meatus. What is superior meatus? Yes, lateral to the superior turbinate is the superior meatus. And what opens in the superior meatus? Yes, the posterior ethmoid. So in the superior meatus, here is the opening of superior meatus is the opening of posterior ethmoid. Posterior ethmoid. We know that ethmoid are multiple group of air cells which are present in the ethmoid bone and they are present anteriorly also. The one that is present anteriorly comes in relation with the middle turbinate, so it is in the middle meatus, whereas the one that is present posteriorly will come in relation to the superior turbinate, so that is what is known as posterior ethmoids. Then where is the opening of the sphenoid sinus? Where is the sphenoid sinus opening? Yes, we can see this here is the sphenoid sinus. We have the sphenoid sinus here. So where is the sphenoid sinus opening? Does it not open in the superior meatus? No, it does not open in the superior meatus. It opens in an area above the superior meatus like this. Yes, this is a recess in between the sphenoid superiorly and the ethmoid inferiorly. So this is known as sphenoethmoidal recess. So the sphenoid sinus will open in the sphenoethmoidal recess. So yes, the superior turbinate occupies the posterior 1/3 and lateral to that is the meatus, superior meatus. What is the opening here? The opening of the posterior ethmoid. And in the sphenoethmoidal recess opens the sphenoid sinus. Sphenoid sinus. Yes, so what do you think should be the least common sinusitis? Least common sinusitis out of all these. Yes, least will be? Yes, the sphenoid. Why? Can you see it is opening just separately in the roof of the nose? So that will not be affected by most of the conditions of the nose. So yes, when I ask you during sinusitis, which is the least common sinusitis? Yes, you are going to tell me. Least is the sphenoid sinusitis. Now let us quickly see the complete endoscopy of the nasal cavity of all the meatuses. Now endoscopy of the meatuses is in 3 passes. It is known as first pass, second pass and third pass. What is first pass? The first pass is when you pass the endoscope inferiorly in between the inferior turbinate and the septum. You pass it inferiorly, go up till the nasopharynx, visualize the structure of the nasopharynx and then come back again and have a look of the inferior meatus. So in the inferior meatus, what will you be able to visualize? Yes, the nasolacrimal duct opening. Now, what is the second pass? This is the first pass. Okay, first pass is inferior turbinate till nasopharynx and then to the inferior meatus. Okay, now what is second pass? Second pass, you again pass the endoscope inferiorly through the floor of the nose in between the inferior turbinate and the septum and till you reach the corner. And this what you use is either an angled endoscope or you can rotate the tip of the endoscope superiorly so that what you see here is the sphenoid sinus. So in the second pass, what you see is the sphenoid sinus, that is the sphenoethmoidal recess area. Ethmoidal recess area. And then what is the third pass? Third pass is the one where you find disease most commonly. Can you tell me what will be the third pass? Yes, the third pass is when you pass the endoscope through the middle meatal area. Yes, so third pass is the middle meatus. So now let us quickly see how this endoscopic anatomy looks like. So now let us see the 3-pass endoscopy of the nose. Now, in the nose, whenever we do endoscopic examination to diagnose conditions of the nose, that is what is known as diagnostic nasal endoscopy or DNE. there are all the areas of the nose that we visualize in 3 parts. They are known as the 3-pass endoscopy. So now before we start with the 3-pass endoscopy, I just want you to get oriented to this. We are now going to do the endoscopic examination of the left nostril. Please note here, can you make out by now which one is the lateral wall and which one is the septum? Yes, we know that the turbinates arise from the lateral wall and they are separate from the lateral wall. So yes, here what we are seeing is this is the inferior turbinate. This is appearing clearly separate from the lateral wall. Whereas here we have this here is the septum, and we can see below we have a sharp deviation of the septum. This is what is the deviated nasal septum, and a sharp deviation at the bony cartilaginous junction is what is called as the septal spur. So now let us quickly see the 3-pass endoscopy. Now in the first pass, the endoscope is passed in between the turbinate and the septum through the floor of the nose, as you can see it, and it is passed up till the nasopharynx. The structures of the nasopharynx are then visualized. You can see here that is the left eustachian tube, the left eustachian tube opening. Then it is brought back into the inferior turbinate, where you can see the opening of the nasolacrimal duct quite anteriorly at the junction of anterior 1/3 and posterior 2/3. And yes, we can see very clearly here that the nasolacrimal duct here is patent. So this is what constitutes the first pass of endoscopy. Now in the second pass, the endoscope is passed through the floor of the nose up till the corona, that is the posterior nasal apertures, and then it is angulated up to see the sphenoethmoidal recess area, where you can see the opening of the sphenoid sinus. So can you see that opening there? Yes, so that is the opening of the sphenoid sinus superiorly, and that turbinate is the superiormost turbinate, the superior turbinate that you can see there, that is the superior turbinate. And in the third pass, we visualize the structures of the middle meatus. So we have now entered into the middle meatus. So we can see here that is the middle turbinate. Here, this, yes, can you make out? Yes, the probe is now touching the uncinate process. Yes, when we remove the uncinate process, we will be into the infundibulum, into which will be opening the maxillary sinus ostia directly. All the structures of the middle meatus along with the openings of the middle meatus is what is the osteometal complex. There the probe is now touching the bulla ethmoidalis, the most prominent anti-ethmoidal cell, and now the probe is in the hiatus semilunaris, and through the hiatus semilunaris it has entered into the infundibulum. So this is what constitutes the 3-pass endoscopy.